Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast, focused on providing valuable information for anyone looking to undertake a new build or extension project. We'll share our tips, tricks and stories from a building designer's perspective.
Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast. Once again, we're joined by Frank Geskis, and we have a special guest on today. Welcome, Wayne Gorman.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's really nice to have you on board today because we've got something a little bit different to chat about that people don't always think about. So you do inspections, building inspections, and you are also a building surveyor as well, is that right?
Not quite. I'm a building inspector. I've done most of the modules for building surveyor, but chose not to go down that path. It's a bit litigious.
It is a little bit, isn't it?
Yes.
But you're a thermal performance assessor as well.
Yep.
What other skills do you have, Wayne?
Big long list.
I was about to say it's a long list, isn't it? You've been in this game for a long time.
Crane drivers, dogman's tickets, trucks, scaffolding, working at heights, thermal performance assessing, lots of condensation courses just recently. Been around for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, and with your inspections, you would have seen the good, the bad, and oh, you are kidding me.
The ugly, yes.
Yes, the ugly.
I sort of break building inspections up into categories of the building age. So there's the pre-energy efficiency 2003. So anything before that time, I know it's going to have no insulation, but from an inspection point of view, there's going to be the usual maintenance. So usually when I walk on site, I'm expecting at least a dozen items of just general maintenance to be done. And then as it gets older, you sort of compare the building with a like building, and there are some special things. I've been very, very fortunate to look at some really old classic Tassie buildings that are pre-1900s. So some of it back to, I think the last one I did was Bower Bank Mill, which is 1853.
Awesome.
Which is an amazing building to look through. And also the workmanship I get to see up in the roof in places where beams are notched together and they're numbered with Roman numerals so that they match together, and all those nice little niceties. The brand new stuff scares me because...
From a longevity point of view?
No, just the actual finish of the building.
Yeah.
Trades not doing their jobs properly, and often I end up with a longer list with a brand new building than I do with a building that's a couple of decades old.
It has changed, hasn't it? It's all about the speed, cost.
Yes. And the other thing I've noticed is that the builders are still trying to do the right thing, but they're so tied up with all the other things that they've got to do, the paperwork and...
Paperwork's astronomical, isn't it?
Trying to keep ahead, and they don't supervise the trades as much, and if a tradesperson gets to the point where he's got to make a decision about something, he won't ask, he'll just make something up.
He's got time to ask.
And that's where it can go a little bit pear-shaped. And I've been on brand newies where flashing hasn't been finished off, and one had no subfloor ventilation at all.
I remember that one. I can't understand how that's even possible, you know. You know what I mean, though.
Things happen, yeah.
So for those who don't know, subfloor ventilation is the vents we put under timber floors so they don't rot out, in basic terms. So for that not going into a brand new build and been inspected, it's like, you're kidding me.
And the other one that's popping up more recently is condensation. And I'm involved in there's a particular suburb where the houses were built 10 to 14 years ago, and the ones that have got the elevated floors, they're rotting out and falling in. It's going to be a big problem, and the insurance companies are walking away from it going, we don't want to know about it. Yeah,
because we had a story I shared of one that we repaired. It was an insurance job, but they were actually going to demo the house. We were able to get in underneath and figure out, redivert the water, more ventilation, more everything, and we're able to repair it. But it was an astronomical cost, but it was still cheaper than pulling the thing down and rebuilding it.
Yep.
So that's pretty horrifying, isn't it?
It is, and I did one recently where it was probably a 1940s build, and the roof had rotted out, so they put a brand new Colorbond roof. It was back before the permeable papers, so it was just reflective foil straight on the battens, Calamon on top of that, and they sealed the roof up. And
like it was for a bushfire attack level?
Well, similar.
Yeah, similar.
Yeah, similar. And when I got in the roof, because it was hardwood rafters and battens, they'd been soaking up moisture for a couple of years, I suppose, and it was just green mould everywhere and moisture readings at 30%.
Yeah, right. That's the thing I've noticed too, is how the roofers are doing things quite differently, because they're told to make it really tight under the new building regs because of the bushfire.
Yep.
Then they go replace a roof on an old building and they do it exactly the same.
Yep.
But they need to be
Breathable.
loose. They need to breathe. You've got to be able to stand there, you can see light everywhere.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, and that's the big difference. And that's pretty scary. But I've also seen where they've actually, some of the new roofs where they screw them down, yet they haven't, compared to the old way they put nails in, and then when we have a high wind, it actually rips the roof off.
Yes.
You know, because they haven't screwed the battens down.
Correct.
And then vice versa, they haven't screwed the rafters down. They've actually ripped up, taken the whole frame with it, you know, because just replacing a roof can actually rip your whole roof off with the right wind conditions.
And you see that a lot in cyclonic areas in Queensland where the whole roof goes. It's not just the cladding, the whole
But we
roof
had that in
goes.
Hobart about 4 years ago. We got involved in a few jobs, and brand new roof on a old, it was about a 70-year-old house,
Yep.
just peeled it off. The frame went in it, landed in someone's backyard up against their house. And it all came down to how they fixed off to the battens, because it just pulled the whole frame off.
Yep.
There was no give. So you would see all sorts of the modifications done to houses, not understand the ramifications, i.e. the roof can't breathe. I've seen it where old heritage places where they don't have damp-proof courses, they put concrete straight up against it and they've got damp-proof problems.
Yep.
You know, there's reasons why the older buildings were built in a certain way,
Yep.
so they could breathe.
Correct. Yeah. And that's a common one where people just pour concrete in and think that's going to fix the problem. And then the other common one too is people pulling out internal walls, thinking that they're just cosmetic. Get rid of that one, get rid of that one, not realising that they're load bearing and can have ramifications.
Yeah, have that curved ceiling, you know, look.
Can happen.
Can happen. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
What other things?
Common one is in the roof space, insulation bats thrown all over the place by electricians mainly.
Not putting them back.
Yeah, just chuck them out of the way and leave them. Sometimes they're piled up.
Well, and they just leave them there.
Yep, just leave them there. So
That's pretty ordinary, isn't it?
a lot of that. Some roof spaces where the insulation's still in the bags.
Oh, why?
Just didn't get around to
Oh, dear.
installing it. So you've got really good thermal resistance underneath the bag for that little quarter of a square metre.
Does my head in there.
And the other thing people don't realise is that insulation in bags has a use-by date on it, because if it's compressed for too long, it won't fluff up to its full width
right.
after time.
Yeah, okay.
So a few years ago when that insulation scheme was in full swing, supported by the federal government, and people were buying container loads of insulation out of China, when they stopped it, there was this frantic effort to try and ditch it because they knew there was a use-by date on it. And the other thing was a lot of people were borrowing interest-free money to buy the insulation to try and make a quid out of it.
It was a crazy time, wasn't it?
It was quite insane, yeah.
The idea was wonderful.
Concept was, well, there's been several of those initiatives and the concept is correct. The installation and execution is, well, unfortunately with the installation install, people died.
Yeah, which was extraordinary.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, and that comes down to safe work practices. So what's some of the craziest things you've seen done to houses? Like I've seen some ridiculous modifications, alterations. I've seen tree stumps holding up floors.
Yep.
I've seen, was it granite rock mortared in place supporting a wall. The engaged pier one had to be wrapped around a sewer pipe, still holding a floor, and they couldn't figure out why the floor was all bouncy.
Yep.
The mould one is, the condensation mould one's the big one that's coming up all the time now, but it's on the modern homes, which are really tight, I find, and certain heating as well.
Yep.
At times.
Yeah, yeah. Wet areas are always an issue.
Yep, wet areas like bathrooms.
Yeah,
generally.
I was under one 2 days ago, and particle board flooring reading 33% under the ensuite, so it's just leaking out somewhere in there. So You've got to rip all that out, start again. The waterproofing code's just changed on the 1st of May, so now it's sort of like extra dollars to do a refit.
But also with that, like in Tasmania when they brought in the new Act, 16, there was no requirements to inspect this. Yet it's the biggest failures, one of the biggest areas of failures in brand new homes is the wet areas. Yet no one's inspecting it.
It is extraordinary in that the ABCB have known about this since the 1990s, and yet, like I said, nothing's been done. And really, even though the waterproofing code, the new one, says that there shall be an inspection and there shall be evidence of the waterproofing membrane, still doesn't go far enough as to protect the consumer.
I can't figure it out. It's the biggest component failures, the most common failure. Why wouldn't we go out of our way to reduce that?
Yep.
And make it law? Because it's the consumers. They don't know. They shouldn't have to know.
No.
All they want is their nice bathroom.
Yeah.
Not rocket science. So I cannot figure this out for the life of me, why they don't have accountability in place for this.
So is this for new homes and, renovations?
Alterations and additions. Yeah.
Yep, anything like that.
So why is it not checked? I don't understand.
Because the government, in our state in particular, didn't make it as part of the mandatory inspections under the legislation. We argued this through part of the Building Design Association of Australia. We argued this. It says this is ludicrous. It's known fact. This is one of the biggest areas of failure. Why wouldn't you inspect it? Now, they get certificates. That's fine. And certain businesses are very reputable and they will do it really well, and here's my certificate. But there's plenty of other guys that don't. They even made it to a point where you could put a bathroom and ensuite in Tasmania, and the only application you need to make, or any permit, is for plumbing. That's it, nothing else. It's just ludicrous.
And the other thing is alterations and additions where the homeowner does their own reno.
Yes.
And they've got no idea of waterproofing. So they'll just put particle board down and at the most they may put an undercoat paint over the top of it. That's it. Still put plasterboard around the showers and the bath and paint it and make it look nice and sell it next week.
Yep. Seen plenty of that too.
Yep.
Isn't that terrible that a consumer can buy something and there's no protection?
There is no protection.
Buyer beware.
Yep, definitely buyer beware.
So that's why you're very handy. But you can't see this, though.
No.
In your inspections, you can't see this, and no inspector can.
No. And there's a Australian standard for the pre-purchase inspection or general inspection, AS 4349.1, and it says it's a visual inspection. The criteria is that you are comparing this house with a like house of same construction and age, and you can only see what you can see. You're not allowed to tear things apart or probe or do anything else. So a very good painter that's called in and they say to paint everything, and I've seen the tops of heater control panels painted and every window painted. They do a really good job of painting everything, but it's all hidden. You can't see anything.
Yeah. Pretty scary.
It is. And for a person that's buying a house, which is usually the biggest item in their life that they're going to do, and then have no real protection or recourse on it is quite amazing.
Oh, I find it extraordinary.
Because if you buy a car in most states and territories around Australia, you have an inspection done, and a lot of the places, the RACs, will want the car for at least 3 hours, and I've got 1 hour to do an inspection on a house that's how many dollars more, and
yeah, exactly
be
right.
part of their life for the rest of their life.
And we've discussed this too, is actually researching at council, what permits do you have for that property?
Yep.
So, that pergola out the back, does that have a permit? Does that extension to the house? Does the actual house have a completion certificate?
Correct.
It's extraordinary. There's a lot of it where they don't have it. The stats, the AOBS stats in Tasmania for completion of houses, you look at the permit to completion ratio is extraordinary.
Yep.
So if you're a homeowner and you had a house built, you're getting it built or extension, you make sure you ask for that completion certificate at the end of it. That's your golden ticket.
Correct. Yep. And the other thing is that often the conveyancing seems to be a little bit loose.
Depends who you go through. There's some that are very good.
Because I've been to a fair few places where persons bought a house 5, 10, 15 years ago, and now all of a sudden all the things on the property are popping up as illegal works or not completed or whatever, and it's like, well, you ask the question, did the previous conveyancer actually have a look?
But it's not a requirement for the conveyancer. That's why they get in Tasmania it's called a 337 report, and that tells you nothing other than what it has been approved for. And that's where I believe there's a few of the conveyances here locally in Launceston. I've noticed that getting them go to council, get a form signed by the current owner, you can do your research. It's very hard for them to understand the drawings and what a permit is if you don't know the process. So I've helped a number of people with that myself and pointed out, well, this shed doesn't have a permit. Now, what's made it confusing is some sheds don't need permits anymore, but it might be built over a pipe or an easement or whatever like that. So there's a lot of research can be done by a professional to do that, to reduce the chances of you buying a piece of crap or buying a problem, I should say. It's because you just don't know, you know.
Well, in theory, there's over 20 inspections that you can have prior to building a house.
Yes.
And the pre-purchase part of it is just one.
Yeah, right.
And a lot of people don't even bother with a pre-purchase. They just go, oh, yeah, looks all right, should be right.
Yeah. I've got my builder mate to check it out.
I think people worry about missing out on the house too, because from a contract point of view, once you've signed, like it's not going to look favourable for you if you have more conditions on that contract.
Correct. And when the frenzy was on, it was standard that the building inspection got scratched out. Often the financial clause got scratched out.
Yeah, that's right.
Turn up with your dollars, put them on the table and expect to get a phone call to offer more dollars. And it was quite insane. And because I went on a journey with a lot of clients, they'd ring up and go, oh, we're looking at this place and we'll put in an offer. And then 2 weeks later, oh, we missed on that one, but we're going to do this one. And then, 8 properties later, they're still looking, and some of them got cunning and they said, oh, this property's got an open home on Saturday. Can you just go along and have a look and see whether it's any good, and we'll put in an offer in. And so it was hard for them to do their due diligence.
Do you think it'd be wise for the government to bring in mandatory inspections and mandatory thermal assessments on existing homes?
The thermal assessments is interesting because the government was looking at doing star ratings at point of sale.
Yeah, and that's why I brought it up, because I remember that.
Back in 2011, I think it was.
Yeah.
And it got muddied by media.
This is in Tasmania, by the way. Yeah.
Well, it was going to be a national scheme.
Yeah.
Because Canberra have had it for...
Yeah, that's right.
two and a half decades. So it's tried and tested. But it got muddied by media and other vested interests. But it's now quietly coming back on the agenda again.
And I think it should be.
And it's disclosure for the buyer as to the performance of the building. As to mandatory inspections for the purchase of the building, Tassie's probably one of the few states that doesn't have it. Most of the other states, it's not mandatory, but the banks require it straight off. You want to buy a house, bank says, give me an inspection first and then we'll talk later. Probably because termites. If the bank has a house and it goes pear-shaped and they want to sell that asset off and it's termite-ridden, well, there's no asset. So that's why they require it on the Big Island. Yeah, whereas here, we don't have termites. So
we've got termites, but they're dopey little buggers, aren't they?
They're not like the...
ferocious.
the turbo termites on the mainland.
No, we're pretty fortunate. We've got other stuff that's probably not real great.
Well, the master builders have had 4 reports of people trying to bring them in to start an industry here. So...
What? Termites?
Yes, they've tried to bring mainland termites here and breed them up to start an industry.
You're kidding me.
That's our society at this
That's
point
ridiculous.
in time. Yeah. And it's only the fact that our winters are still
I was about to say.
and wet enough that they can't get a foothold.
Just because the mainlanders generally don't like our weather down here sometimes. Either you love it or you hate it. You'd have to get the Tasmanian tuxedos for each one of these ants. It's ludicrous, isn't it? It's people in society.
Yep. Where people think there's a dollar to be made, they'll try it out, see whether it works.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. And it would wreak havoc here.
It would do.
Eventually, it'd take them a while to get going. But anyway, we may end up having to build houses with ant caps on the top of our stumps. And
that's all we need.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't get it, condensation will.
Yeah.
Because that's our own problem. Well, it's not exclusive to Tasmania. I mean, it's all everywhere, isn't it?
It is.
Different climate zones, different reasons, but We're not building to the conditions and how our lifestyles
Correct.
work. And as it's going to be really interesting with some of the states going to the full 7 stars, the level of impact this is going to have on the construction, because we strongly feel, a lot of designers, architects, I know, feel that going to 7-star without the proper advice from through the NCC, we believe we're going to have some pretty sick buildings in the years to come.
There's going to be ramifications all around.
Massively.
Yep.
You know, for us, it's educating our customers, but some of this is quite expensive to try and deal with. But in Tasmania, well, I'm pretty stoked with the government here, where they're investing a lot of money. I heard the Victorian government's investing money here as well in research on the condensation, which is wonderful news. But it's a bit late when you've already given the approval, because you're doing the research after you've given the green light to go ahead with it.
That's right, yep.
So, yeah, I can't see how that's going to end very well.
And the other thing is the occupants of houses have changed their lifestyle over the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And you ask people whether they open windows anymore, and it's like, no, never opened any window in my house, and it's all controlled within, and moisture builds up to the point where it reaches saturation point and runs down the windows, and people don't understand why it's running down the windows.
No. People, open your windows, let fresh air come in, get the old air out. Do it on a regular basis. It's healthy for you.
Yeah, and it's not part of our culture either. We've never had to do it before. A few years ago, we had friends in Germany, and we stayed with a friend's mother because they didn't have a room in their house. And every morning, the mother would go up, have her breakfast, have a cup of tea, and then she'd go around the house systematically and open every window around the house. And by the time she got back to the first one, she would start closing them again. But in that time, there was enough interchange to dump the warm, moist air out of the building and bring in some colder, non-moist air. And that was her exchange, and she did that each day.
But they knew the problem.
Correct, and it was part of their culture. Everyone did it.
But I've noticed in Tassie, people won't.
No.
Especially in the middle of winter. Why would I open the windows? Turn the heat pump on. That fixes it.
It does.
Sorry, we call it heat pump. Mainlands call it AC. We use it more for heating. But I find it quite amazing that people won't even consider it. They don't want to lose, because the cost of heating now, it's getting worse, they don't want to waste the heat.
Correct. And after the 1st of July, when our power goes up another 20%, it'll be even more conservative about running your house correctly. And
not necessarily why you can put extra insulation in your house, but it still doesn't help the condensation issue generally.
No.
So you're now starting to see that with your inspections. You'd be seeing a lot more potential, or you're starting to see the problems of that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's subtle. Like, I'll do an inspection and someone will say, "Oh, the exhaust fan in the ensuite's dripping water." After you've finished having a shower, you come back and there's a pool of water underneath the exhaust fan. And I go, "Okay." When I have a look in the roof, I can see that the flexi ducting is 25 metres long when it should be like a metre and a half, and it's condensating in the flexi tube and building up to the point where there must be pools of water in there, and it's then running back down out the exhaust and onto the floor. And then from that you start to get mould growth, because it's being fed moist, warm environment every day, and mould growing, and then people starting to get sick, so it can have ramifications.
Yeah, huge.
Is it also, though, the contradiction with other areas, for example, bushfire, where, you know, they're encouraging people to really tighten, you know, everything on their house, their windows?
Well, just any gap,
yeah.
you know, ember mesh and tighten everything else. As we're talking about the roofs, it's this whole policy now of making roofs super, super tight.
Yeah.
So where's the balance then, is my question. Like, why is that not considered, all the other aspects?
There was no consideration to the balance. When that was brought in, it was like, this is bushfire, this is what we deal with, this is how it's done. No testing or consideration was done on the effect on the building.
It was a knee-jerk decision.
It was very much a knee-jerk.
Yeah.
And I understand it to a point, but now we've got these other problems. We build the thing so tight. Well, parts of it, it's not really, really tight, not like how they do in other parts of the world, but it's enough to cause major problems. So, and I believe the Building Codes Board are investigating that on how to bushfire related to how we live and how we design houses going in the future. But I think it's far too late. It should have been done years and years ago.
Yep.
But the fire authorities have brought this in, and I totally understand why they brought it in, but it's causing other problems. Fix one thing, break something else.
Well, it's also caused a bit of dilemma for building surveyors because they're always looking at their risk. Where's my highest risk?
Yeah.
And when you look at condensation will destroy a modern pine house in 5 to 7 years, and the chances of a bushfire happening are 1 in 20, 1 in 30.
Depends where you live.
Yeah. So building surveyor's going to go, well, my condensation is a greater risk. I need breathability in the building and then be at risk of fire attack at some later point. So it sort of puts them in between a rock and a hard place.
It does. Yeah.
We might wrap up part 1 there. Stay tuned for the next episode with part 2 with Wayne Gorman and more stories about his experience with building inspections. Thanks for listening to the Building Design Primetime Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
You're listening to the Building Design Primetime Podcast.